I don't want to do it, actually. Not on my own. It's not about singing on my own, anyway. Yeah, and if anyone else wants to join in, give it a go. Come on, Nicola. Come on. Come on, Rebecca. Oh, come on. Gareth, look, this is a bold man. He's never done it before.
Okay.
When I want you in my arms, when I want you, and all your charms whenever I want you. All I have to do is dream, 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 dream when I need you in the night, and I need you to hold you tight whenever.
The experience of music I liked most, which was the singing in church, was done by a group of people who weren't skilled. Just a group of people, you know. I knew them during the rest of the week as the baker and the coalman and everything. It was to do with entering into an experience which takes you over. You're part of something bigger. I love working with singers. Just was working on an Andrea Corr song. She asked me for some suggestions of songs that she could do. It's good to show you because I've got a 23-piece choir on the end of this, which is all me. 23 of me. I was always aware of most of my life being shared with my friends, but then, without thinking about it in particular, I developed a sort of separate life of discovery. My hobby when I was a kid was collecting fossils. And I didn't know anyone else who liked doing that, so it's something I did on my own. And I would cycle off to places that I'd heard about, like Butley Crag and various beaches and so on. And I would just take some sandwiches with me and spend a day looking at stones, really. And I remember that very clearly as being very happy and transcendent time. It's beyond thinking, actually.
Talk to me as if from a distance, and I reply with impressions chosen from another time, from another time.
I love discovering a place where I feel that nobody's been before. I love that. A piece of music becomes real for me when it seems to become a place, you know, when I can sort of feel what the temperature would be and what the light that would go with it would be and what colours. I just started making music deliberately to create a more desirable reality. Ooh, that rain sounds fabulous, doesn't it? encouragement of modern life is to tell you to pay attention to yourself and take control of things. We can invent technologies and we can think of ways of organizing the world to our advantage, to our benefit. However, the other thing we obviously love doing is almost completely the opposite, is putting ourselves in situations where we're not the primary figure, where we are not in control, but we're carried along, we're floating on something. And I like that state that I call surrender, and other people call transcendence, and other people call getting out of it.
Which of those pictures do you think is the most revealing?
Well, I have the nicest waist on that one. God, I hate remembering.
Well, I'm here looking through an old picture frame, just waiting for the perfect view. I hope something special will step into my life, another fine edition of you.
You know I hate remembering. I can't bear it. It's all past, you know.
My castaway this week is a rock musician. As the flamboyant keyboard player of the group Roxy Music, he achieved huge popular success. But at the height of his fame, he gave up the world of wigs, gigs and adoring fans to experiment with electronic music. Now widely admired for the way in which he revolutionised background music in airports and supermarkets, he's become the intellectual guru of the rock world.
I always like that thing you say about music for airports, that everyone else was making all that noise and there you were, you know, making this beauty and making this very still music that had taken everything out, and elsewhere everyone was getting very worked up about other things.
That's a form of innovation, just to leave certain things out. Like to leave out, you know, one of the innovations of ambient music was leaving out the idea that there should be a melody, or words, or a beat. It was like having a formula ready-made there, if you could read it. And ambient music was certainly like that, you know, all the signs were in the air. In fact, there were a lot of other people doing similar things, really. I just gave it a name.
As a collaborator with David Bowie and as producer of the group U2, he's made sure that his name has stayed in the mainstream too. Now, tell me about your family. This is Woodbridge in Suffolk. Now, your father was a postman, but so were lots of other members of your family, weren't they? You come from a long line of postmen, is that right?
Yes, we've been dealing with communications for many generations. And I'm carrying on the tradition. Yeah, my father was a postman, my grandfather was a postman, my great-grandfather was a vet and part-time postman, my uncle was a postman, but they also all did other things. My father repaired clocks and watches, my uncle repaired porcelain, and was a watercolorist, a landscape painter.
So they were all postmen with passions for something else?
Postmen with passions, that sounds good, yes.
My grandfather lived in a deconsecrated chapel. which was full of these things you wound up, and great big brass plates would tremble round, and they sounded fabulous, some of these things. They really were the first synthesizers. So he had player pianos, hurdy-gurdies, and one of his jobs was to repair church organs. Quite often churches would replace a bank of pipes, and he would take the old ones. So he built up this ever-increasing collection of organ pipes, and he used to set them up in the chapel, in the toilets and everywhere. There were bits of organs, and they were all operated from a keyboard. So eventually the chapel became a kind of extended organ that you stood inside of, essentially. It was an all-round experience. When he died, we inherited the player piano, and I think probably the first really important experience of my life musically was pedaling through Jerusalem on the player piano, and I absolutely adored that piece of music. Player pianos had a particular sound. They have a very kind of mechanical sound, which to me made the kind of sentimentality of that piece even more poignant. It was like emotion produced by a machine.
I have recorded my brain patterns on that reel of tape. In a moment, I'm going to transfer that knowledge and experience to little Joe.
Do you actually go back and reread them, or is it?
No,
a thing
hardly ever. I do occasionally, but mostly it's the act of writing something down is what puts it into my memory, and in fact takes it out of my mind and puts it outside where it's then possible to think about it differently, I think. I had a phase of keeping diaries like this. This is a way of recording a day. So it's like recorded as a journey through the day. So this was a day in Russia, actually, in 1987. I don't know the date exactly. Tuesday, it says. A Tuesday in 1987. The notebooks are really a mixture of, oh, must do this, and don't forget Dentist Thursday, and how to make a constantly self-varying light machine. I can remember towards the end of my time at art school thinking, so am I going to go into fine art or am I going into popular art? And then, of course, when the Velvet Underground came along, I thought, so it is possible to straddle the two.
There's a new sensation, a fabulous creation, a danceable solution to teenage revolution. Do the strand love when you feel love.
I wanted to look sensational, and most of the science of looking sensational had been pursued by women, not by men. It felt very creative to be able to look at anything in the whole range of clothing and styles and so on and say, I'm going to put that with that and that and that. One of the ideas we had, and Brian had very consciously did this, was that popular music already had a history that could be picked and chosen from. There were already ideas and styles and so on that could be put next to one another, and the collision of them could do something. Taking an idea from doo-wop with an idea from Holiday Inn lounge music with an idea from heavy metal, and putting them together and seeing what the synthesis made. The funny thing to think, though, is that so we were doing that from about 1971 onwards, and pop music was really 16 years old, and we're now, what, 54 years on.
Is it a myth, then, that Bryan Ferry was irked that you got more girls than he did?
I don't know whether he was or not.
Did you get more girls?
Yeah. I think the music I make always really comes out of the tools, like this little synthesizer here. I've been arguing for a long time for synthesizers that had inconsistencies built into them, and they're just starting to do that now. I have to tell you, it's an amazing feeling to play a keyboard where every note behaves totally differently from every other.
Is that what was going on there?
Yeah, let's listen. This is a scale of C. It's fantastic. It's a total surprise machine. So let's play sort of Louie Louie. There you go. That's what I call music. And you had plasticine, and it was all lovely colours, and then after about a week and a half it was all that kind of browny purple colour. Well, I think that's what digital technology does to music sometimes, and that's not because of the sonic fact of it, it's because you can endlessly keep working something. And so the temptation of the technology is to smooth everything out. You know, you're listening to a thing over and over and over, and there's that one bar where the drums are a little bit shaky, and you think, oh, well, I'll just take another bar of drums and put them in there. And indeed, when you're doing that, the immediate effect is, oh, that's better. But of course, if you keep doing that, what you gradually do is homogenize the whole song until every bar sounds the same, until every rhythm guitar part is perfect, until, in fact, there's no evidence of human life at all in there.
You'd be hard-pressed to make a record that sounds like this now, though, wouldn't you?
So this is the kind of thing that producers try to do, don't they?
Yeah.
They try to figure out how could you make this sound mad. And it's a bit like trying to reconstruct a Jackson Pollock painting, you know? But carefully, bit by bit.
There's a whole range of technology that is to do with that, isn't there? You can buy, for your perfect Pro Tools rig now, you can buy all these plugins, I've got lots of them, that will make your instrument sound like it's coming through a broken 1972 Vox amplifier, or through an unbroken 1972 Vox amplifier. Yeah. And there are technologies for making things sound like they're on hissy tape.
Oh, and different brands of tape.
Different brands of tape.
Yeah.
We're talking about here about tools that allow you to do incredibly specific things on a music level, and I'm wondering whether that is a, as they say in the ad world, is an internal audience phenomenon. You write stories for the New Yorker, half of what you do is an internal audience thing. All I really want to do is impress my editor. That's actually, I'm quite happy if I do nothing but that. But so it's actually, for an artist, it's a totally legitimate motivation, right?
If you listen to the top 20 now, you'll hear at least 10 records that sound extremely similar. And it might well be that that's producers referring to other producers, basically, saying, I want to know how he did that, and I want to do it.
Coming out simple, but for what it is the very nature of the sound of the game.
Okay, my favourite productions. I'd have to say State of Independence by Donna Summer, produced by Giorgio Moroder. It's an amazing production. Putting the crudely mechanical, which is what the sequences and so on were, this kind of Germanic robot thing, against the incredibly sexy, emotional, organic gospel singing. It sounded so far ahead of people who thought they were making modern music. Tomorrow Never Knows, again, very important for me because it was very clear that song didn't really exist before it got to the studio. Turn off your mind, relax and float downstream. It is not, I don't know the next chord. Right. It is not trying. You know, it would have been, I mean, I'm sure it wouldn't be as crappy as that, but that's the kind of thing it would have been, and yet it turned into this amazing jet stream psychedelic fantasy piece, and entirely to do with electronics and with the use of the studio, and with a lot of brilliant open minds. Then the Velvet Underground, that's the production of Restraint. You have to admire people who say, the best thing I can do for this piece of music is defend it against the recording industry. Because I'm sure there were all sorts of people sitting around saying, oh, you should get a proper drummer. It'd be so much better with a proper drummer instead of that woman who could only hit one drum at a time.
I started using click tracks for drums in 1983, and drum machines at the, drummers would learn to play along to perfect time. So now you've got a whole generation of people who've learnt their thing, and they're perfectly in time. I mean, drummers now have fantastic time.
Yeah.
They're all very similar, though, because, there's, for instance, a drummer like Simon Kirke from Free, so laid back. And then you've got Stuart Copeland from The Police. They're both in time, but one is really at the front of the beat, one is really behind. You don't get that so much now.
Yes.
Drummers are in the groove. Yeah. They're on the beat, So you're getting humans learning from machines.
Well, life's too short, and you're too sweet. Every day of your life, child, you gotta spend with me.
I grew up in a little town in Suffolk, which had a population of about 4,000, I think, when I was born, but was surrounded by air bases, both American and British air bases. And there were, within about 5 miles of the town, there were 17,000 GIs. And this town was the closest place for them to go for entertainment. So there were also lots of coffee bars in the town which had jukeboxes. which mostly had American music on, because the clientele were mostly Americans. So from a very early age, I was hearing really, really good doo-wop and deep Southern R&B. I've still got some of those records. Life's Too Short by the Lafayettes, which was not a doo-wop song, but a very mysterious single that really meant a lot to me. The main rhythmic element in it is just someone playing rim shots, playing on the edge of a snare drum. There's no big drums in it, so you have this very sparse background feeling and this urgent singing over the top.
I need you for real, baby. I've had my time to play. Now come on.
I was always impressed by music that I couldn't penetrate the mystery of.
Don't make me so blue.
I spent a large part of my childhood singing things I didn't understand. I can still sing a lot of the Latin Mass, actually. Adveniat in regnum tuum, fiat voluntas tua, sicut in cielo et in terra. Beautiful words. I just sang it as pure sound. When I went to grammar school, there were these ridiculous rules. We all had to wear school caps, and if any hair could be seen below the cap, you were publicly shaved. Sat on stage and had your hair cut in school assembly. Catholics love that kind of thing.
Do you think of Catholicism in itself, for better or worse, as a kind of work of art as such, that has its own rules and methods developed over time, a kind of fiction that's asking you to think a certain way?
I don't know if you remember, I had a song on my second album, I think, called Put a Straw Under Baby, which was a recollection of a story we were told when we were young, that every time you committed a sin, it was like taking a straw out from under Christ's body in the manger. So you were actually making the infant Christ more uncomfortable by committing your sins. But of course, the ingenuity of the young mind is such that you carefully parcel the world up so that all the things you want to do are only venial sins. If you die with venial sins on your soul, unconfessed venial sins, you go to purgatory. Mortal sins is a whole different issue. If you die with a mortal sin on your soul, you go to hell, eternal damnation.
Put a straw under baby, your good deed for the day. Put a straw under baby, keep the splinters away.
So you're already developing like procedures and treatments and processes to deal with certain situations and find solutions.
If you're in a religion that very strongly insists that you believe, then to reject, to decide not to do that, is quite a big hurdle to jump over. Yeah, they were crises, actually, in a sense of, I didn't have a nervous breakdown or anything, but you don't forget the thought process that you went through, you know. I think it introduces you to a life of intellectual self-criticism, basically. And I think that's why very often Catholics are so ardent about what they do, because they've been brought up to be ardent about that, and they just switch the ardency to something else.
I didn't have any of this at all. I had no religious sort of framework around me, and from the outside, it is some kind of heavenly quality, some kind of beauty, some kind of paradise that you're definitely chasing, and very stubborn about it.
So you, as somebody who didn't come from that kind of background, when you heard that, did you think that that filled a space in your...
Yes.
Yes, so do you think that there's an appetite in people for that to
Yes,
happen?
I did. I mean, it must have been because it was like a vacuum. I absolutely responded to it, almost like a religious... I mean, I'm often trying to work out why it's had such an impact. And I think because I gave it so much of that I was looking for, that I guess I was sensing traces that you'd given it coming from where you'd been.
The same preoccupations always interested me. Certainly one of them is the fascination with the fact that simple systems can produce complex results, which is still a revolutionary idea to me, that you don't need complexity to produce complexity. What I like doing is making systems which produce music, and I control the inputs to the system, that's to say the kinds of sounds and harmonic information that goes in. And then I let it explore the permutations for me. So basically, I then watch the experiment carry itself out. John Conway is an English mathematician, and in the 60s, he came out with this very simple thing called the game of life. It's essentially a grid. Cells in the grid can be alive or dead, and there are 3 very simple rules for whether a cell comes to life, stays alive, or dies. They always apply to all the cells in the same way. And yet, sometimes, if you get one group of cells and you set them going, the whole thing will die out in 6 generations or 15 generations. Other times, you change the tiniest detail of that, you add perhaps 1 extra cell. It will last for 15,000 generations and proliferate in huge, complicated patterns and retract and explode again and so on and so on. It's one of the great experiments of the 20th century. The game of life is like the Beatles in science.
Well, Brian, we surely have to begin by you explaining these works of art.
Okay, so what you're looking at is a piece of art that I produced about 4 years ago, I guess. It's called 77 Million Paintings, which is the number of combinations that it can generate. It's a product of a different approach to making art and a different approach to composing music as well. So we're going to be talking about some kind of a crossover between art and science. 150 years ago, Darwin published his great work. It really gave us a different opinion about how things come into being. So the classical opinion, the dominant Judeo-Christian one certainly, is that things come into being from the top down. That's where the idea of a creator comes from. What Darwin and evolution theory suggests is actually it's not that way around. They come into being from the bottom up.
And it was a stupendous revolution in thinking. Darwin didn't only make us feel more modest because we were cousins of apes, although that was what upset quite a lot of Victorians. The deeper thing he did to upset people was to show that we, vaunted, complicated beings as we are, came into being from slime, from very, very simple beginnings, by slow, gradual degrees. And that served as a model for how you can explain other things, however complicated they may be, however much they may seem to be designed, they can come into being without any design at all.
You know, when we look at the incredible beauty and intricacy of nature, and how fantastically complex the interconnections are. It's very tempting to think, well, boy, somebody really smart must have thought that lot out. And it's quite difficult to intuit that it could have happened by a sequence of a very large sequence of relatively simple steps. And in fact, my record, Music for Airports, which, can we play that CD? Let's play track 2 of that. So this piece is actually a very, very simple piece of music. I think there are 5 or 6 R's in it, and each one is a loop, and each loop is of a different and incommensurable length, so that they're constantly clustering together in different ways. That's all that's going on. It's very, very simple. But it sort of holds its own somehow as a piece of music.
It does.
It has an identity, and I still like hearing it. But it was terribly simple to make. I've got a special little lead that lets me go into that, and I found it earlier, and I put it on a table. Is that on audio?
Should be.
Is it under system preferences? I don't know, it's for sticking a guitar into your Mac. It's a beautiful instrument. It's a shame it ended up in my hands, really. The trouble is I modified this one so much that it's probably unfixable now. I don't think this is going to work, this one. Listen to nothing. Oh, shite. Antediluvian objects. It's completely knackered. Not a single thing makes a noise. I used to have 7 of these. If you think about the history of composition, certainly classical composition, it's very hierarchical. It's a very old style of specification where you have God, then you have the composer, then you have the conductor, and then you have the leader of the orchestra, and then you have the section principals, and then the section sub-principals, and the flow of information is always downwards. The composer Cornelius Cardew wrote a piece called The Great Learning, and there was one section of that I participated in the first recording of, but it was the first recording I ever made before any Roxy music or anything like that. Anybody can perform it. In fact, it was normally performed by mixtures of people who were musicians and non-musicians, mostly art students, actually. But somehow or other, the piece always came out sounding... It had an identity. It sounded somehow similar from one performance to another. It wasn't random. It looked completely anarchic and amorphous, and yet it always came out as that piece of music. And I thought, this is very interesting. How does this work? And I didn't really have a way of understanding how it worked until this book, Brain of the Firm, came along, a book on essentially management. And Brain of the Firm is about how complex systems organize themselves effectively. And it contrasts that kind of pyramid form of control with a different kind of internal organization. The model for organization that Stafford was using was the brain. He was saying, well, how does the brain organize the flow of information? That is a funny thing, that a book on essentially management should have... It's first of all odd that it fell into my hands, and that was because of my mother-in-law, who was a very bright woman who was interested in those kinds of things and had always hoped that I might do something useful with my life other than being an artist and would occasionally slip me books that were supposed to convert me, yes, and put me on the true path.
It was great when you wrote to him, at long last. He was dealing with management people all the time, and an artist comes along and applies it in a way totally unforeseen by him.
Stafford didn't know that a music like that existed at the time, so I was saying, here's a new form of art that's going on, and it happens that you have the language in which to understand it.
He was a man totally devoted to unity, to wholeness. Everything was linked, and cybernetics and systems theory was, for him, the science of making connections. Cybernetics, to an extent, is a belief system. You do start seeing the world through connections, and you start to see them everywhere. The word itself, it's just worth going into the etymology of cybernetics, which I always find helpful to keep it anchored in the ancient Greek word kubernetes. And that simply means steersman or helmsman. And the first recorded use of it is in Homer, in the Odyssey. The man in the boat steering the rudder, you'd say aiming for the lighthouse, the harbour, with the tides and the waves and the winds. He's got to negotiate.
How do you help a band when they get stuck?
That's a hard question to answer because there are all sorts of different types of stuckness. So there's all the diplomatic stucknesses, there's whole varieties of those, but basically to do with the social dynamics of a group of people working together. So X is a singer, but he picks up a guitar and has a great guitar idea, and he plays it brilliantly. You think, that's what I want, but you feel you sort of have to offer it to the guitarist because it's his territory. And he doesn't do it as well. The reason it sounds good when that guy does it is because he's not really a guitarist, so it has a different character. When this guy does it, it sounds like all the other guitar playing on the record. For diplomatic reasons, it has to kind of go through the routine before it's accepted that actually he should play it, and it should remain how he played it.
We used to say in U2, and I think it's true of Coldplay, that we didn't go to art school, we went to Brian.
It sounded great.
Fantastic.
The only direction I might offer you is that the first chorus might be a little more restrained than the others. That second low verse was beautiful on this. It was really nice to have that almost whispering quality to it.
I think they've learnt a lot from him. He's a mind-expanding drug.
I had one computer which had all of the stuff I'd been doing with Coldplay and all of the stuff with U2 at a certain point. And I had to very carefully label those things as sort of separate departments of my computer because I originate a lot of stuff, you know. I often get something going with a beat or a sound or something like that. And what I was paranoid about was that I was going to, because I never remember over the months that these things take, was that both bands might end up with exactly the same sort of basic track. and I wouldn't realise until it was too late.
A machine. I can't get no satisfaction.
Some people take a cold morning shower to freshen up on the outside. Some people take Eno instead, for a teaspoonful in water freshens them up inside too. Eno, the civilized alternative to a cold shower.
If the purpose is to try to find a new place to start from, then sometimes I just write on bits of card, rhythm, melody, percussion, something like that. And then I give the cards out randomly to people. I think that can be very liberating for musicians, especially if you're improvising in some way. Just saying, let's try some experiments and see what else we could do than the things we would naturally fall into. I'm not one of the sort of committed avant-gardists who's stuck with the diagram. As a listener who grew up listening to pop music, I'm interested in results. Did that work? No, we'll do it differently next time. Did it sell? No, we'll do it differently next time. I wanted the ideas to be seductive and the result to be seductive.
John, it's Houston. If there's nothing startling to report about the ride, we'd rather hold off.
What we haven't done as progressives is to think about how we can tell not a cynical but a positive story. If we told a story in the right way together, we could catapult all of these very interesting positive developments into a new story that we all share and that excites us.
Part of that is saying there's already some good news. We already are globally governing quite a few things. I mean, actually, I'm sure, I must make a list one day, but there are loads of UN committees, and some of them are very effective.
Yes.
In fact, I just wrote a little article about the European Rail Harmonisation Committee, which is exactly the kind of committee I like to find out about. A lot of the things we like are the result of global governance of some sort or another, and we want more of it. To me, that seems like a very exciting project. You know, it's the beginning of a real 21st century world. The world of the future, the world that science fiction writers might have written about 50 years ago, when they always described planets as though they're single entities.
If we're going to have a positive vision of how we go forward into the future, I wonder what contribution artists can make.
What artists do is that they celebrate and draw to attention philosophical ideas. If you see what I mean?
I do, yeah.
This is something that I'm just starting to think about with my own work. As I notice what it's doing for people, I'm thinking, I shouldn't think of this in the art context. I should think of this in the health context.
Yes, sure.
That's my new thought. So we were talking about this before with Bloom. What happens to people, they have a kind of experience which is something to do with calming down, changing the speed you're operating at, some kind of self-reflection. I'm the cowboy type in that I love to go out and find new territory where I think perhaps I'm wrong, but where I feel that nobody's been before. So all this light work that I've been doing, they're very slow, there's no narrative, there's no continuity, there's no dramatic surprises. The rate of change is extremely slow, and yet I see people go to these things and sit there totally quietly for half an hour, 2 hours, 4 hours sometimes. It's a very church-like experience, funnily enough. The thrill for me, as much as anything else, is because I don't see anybody else doing it. And I know it's powerful, you know. So I think, wow, I've got this all to myself. So instead of shooting arrows at somebody else's target, which I've never been very good at, I make my own target around wherever my arrow happens to have landed. It's like you shoot an arrow and then you paint the bullseye around it. Kids now, they seem to have very little of the snobbery about music that I had. And the downside of that is that music doesn't play a kind of an ideological part in their lives. It is slightly surprising to realize that something which had enormous meaning for you doesn't have so much meaning for them. It's just the currency is devalued in some way. So what I look out for is, so what does that for them now? Because I assume there's always a currency through which people are communicating with one another. So they do pass music around, and they appear to love music, but what they really seem to like is the communal experiences that music can give rise to. So what they really like is going to festivals. What they really like is exchanging music on Facebook, not for the music, but for the fact of the exchange, of the communication.
Let's have record number 8.
The last record is a gospel song. I mean, gospel is, I suppose, the music I've listened to more than any other for the last few years. I particularly love the gospel style of singing, the way that the voice is liberated in this way of singing. This is a song by probably the most liberated of all gospel singers. Her name is Dorothy Love Coates, and the song is Lord, Don't Forget About Me.
Don't forget about me, Jesus. Don't forget about me. Oh, don't forget about me. Oh, Lord, remember. The times I've stood helpless and couldn't do nothing but shed.
If you listen to millions of gospel songs, as I have done, and you kind of try to distill out what do they all have in common, it's a sense that somehow we could win through, we could make it. Gospel music is never pessimistic. Gospel music is always about the possibility of transcendence, of things suddenly getting better. And the other thing it's about is the loss of ego, the idea of somehow the way you're going to do this, the way you're going to get through or get over, as they say in gospel music, is to do with losing yourself and becoming part of something bigger.
Whatever your faith is enables you to be able to sing gospel as long as you have a belief in something. In a sense, that is the equivalent to believing in God, isn't it? The language is different, but you believe in something. You have a faith in something.
Well, that's right, or a hope, actually. I think that The message of gospel music is completely universal, to do with a basic human attitude. The completion of a work is to care about the responses you get to it. The thought of saying, okay, now this is going to release is a very good word, be free from me. I'm not going to be there to make excuses for it any longer. That's when I really start to think about it and work hard on it. So I think that the thought of finishing something is the thought of how it connects with the rest of the world. In that computer there, I have probably 1,500 pieces of music that I've never released, and they are meaningless until I release them. They're really just tooling around. I often sit here in the evenings just finding what I can do that I've not been able to do before. I sometimes think, oh, I know, it would be nice, a sort of wobbly sound. What have I got in the wobbly department?